Thank you.
Can you explain how often this is administered? We know it's by infusion. Is it monthly and for how long?
Yeah, that's a good question. First of all, Barbara, thank you so much. Barbara's been covering so many stories on Alzheimer's disease, and so many media representatives here have, and we thank you. That's really important to get the word out. And I think, I know Barbara's been covering aducanumab right from the beginning. Yeah, so this is a medicine. It's a monoclonal antibody. It's an immune-based treatment that targets the amyloid plaques. It gets into the brain at low concentrations. It binds to the plaque and stimulates the immune system to break it up and clear it. And it's given monthly. For right now, it's open-ended. We don't know how long people, what the right amount of time, the duration should be. And that's something we really need to study further, because there could be an induction phase, like in cancer. You have a tumor burden, you get the tumor down, you have certain treatments to start, and then you have a maintenance phase, and that may be true for these antibodies, and we have to study that further. Right now, it's open-ended monthly treatment, given intravenously. Yes?
Dr. Salloway, good morning. A comment and a question. First of all, congratulations to you and your team. Your passion and your drive for this work clearly evident in your sentiments this morning. So thank you for that. I also want to acknowledge Mark's comments and his industry and bravery for stepping up, receiving treatment, and paving the way for other patients. The question, as clinicians, what kind of patients should we be thinking about as the best candidates for this treatment as they are in front of us in our offices?
Right, so that's really important. Well, again, thank you, Jim, for your leadership and support over many years. This really is, I know I'm getting a lot of attention here, but this really is a team effort and team science, and it's a big team, and broadly with the community. So thanks for your support and for that question. That's a really important question, because it surprised us. The label for this medicine is broad. It says for the treatment of Alzheimer's disease. And we studied this medicine for people with early Alzheimer's disease, so people with mild cognitive impairment and mild dementia who are building up amyloid plaques. We plan to follow the clinical trial guidelines criteria in offering the medicine to patients. So I think the people who are most likely to benefit are people with early Alzheimer's disease, mild cognitive impairment, mild dementia. That means that there's memory trouble, but the people are still functioning pretty well in an early stage of Alzheimer's. And we will need to confirm that there is a buildup of amyloid plaques, either with a PET scan or with spinal fluid testing. That's also not in the label explicitly. What the FDA does is they refer to the trials in the package insert, but they don't explicitly require early Alzheimer's or amyloid testing. But I think good clinical practice, the evidence is for that early patient population, and we're going to strongly recommend that. We're going to do that here and recommend that to others. And hopefully there'll be some practice guidelines coming from dementia experts. I'm very excited. There's a whole, as you can imagine, there's a network of centers here, the hospitals up at Harvard, at Mayo, at UC San Francisco, all around the country, who are developing protocols for how to use this medicine. And we're pretty much in agreement. It's basically following the clinical trial guidelines. And hopefully those will be published. We'll come out with some publication soon, so to help guide clinical practice.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Alexander with Channel 12. One of the concerns people have with this drug is its cost.
Yeah.
It's in the thousands. What would you say to candidates who could take this drug who may be deterred because of that and the burden that they feel if they were able to be prescribed it?
Right. Cost is definitely an issue, Alexander. So monoclonal antibodies are biologics that tend to be expensive. This is our first experience with them in Alzheimer's, but certainly for cancer, for multiple sclerosis, and for other important diseases, they're used routinely and they're expensive. So that is a health economic issue. It's a personal issue for patients and families. We're waiting to see about coverage. We're hoping that Medicare will provide coverage, and that the Medicare supplement plans, which make up the majority of patients majority of people with Alzheimer's are Medicare beneficiaries. So hopefully there will be coverage. There certainly will be counseling programs to help people, but this is a major issue, and also making sure that it's widely available, not just to people with good insurance or the small percentage of people who can pay for it on their own. But that is a challenge with any new treatment that is a biologic like this one. Yeah.
Yes, Dr. Salloway, you had mentioned that you're hoping that Medicare covers it and that there will be supplemental coverage that will cover it. In the case of Mr. Archibald, since that's a question mark, who is going to cover it for him? And if Medicare or the supplemental coverage doesn't cover his expenses, who will pay what he has to pay? Will Butler pay that?
Well, maybe I'll have Mary, because she was going to answer this better than I will.
So I want to echo Steve's comment that we are working through this, but I want to assure you we have financial counselors and folks here that are going to work aggressively to make sure people have access and work with them around how that coverage will work. You know, I can't commit to Butler covering the shortfalls. That's not something I can do here, but I can tell you we already have a team of folks who are working with individuals who want this therapy and working to make that possible.
Yeah, go ahead. Mr. Corkery.
First, I must say thank you to Dr. Salloway. I'm one of the basics. I got probably the longest record. I've been here chasing him for about, I'd say, close to 15 years.
Yeah, that's true.
My name is Neil Corkery. I was a principal, teacher, and I had been in the seminary before that. I was going to be a priest, but they frowned on my drinking.
I don't see that as a problem, Neil.
And I try to be honest about it. And I think I chased it because it's at least 15 years ago, I was running, I ran the Drug and Alcohol Treatment Association, and we had a conference, and I went to introduce something, and I knew them very well, and I couldn't remember the name, and it bothered me. So eventually I was telling a friend, Charlie Maynard, who ran the Providence Center, what had happened. He says, you know, that happens to me sometimes too. And then we went in, this is time of Bruce Sunderland as the governor, so you could tell how long I've been. And they were having a going away for one of the authorities, and he was supposed to speak. And he was late, so they asked me if I'd like to speak. Of course I'd like to speak. So I started speaking, and within a minute or two, I couldn't get a word out. And I made a joke. Well, I tell you, Charlie, and that's how I wound up running up to Dr. Salloway's office, because, and I know you, so just,
well, Neil.
Yeah, I see we have to give them. And the last thing he said to me was, you have 4 of the 5 markers for Alzheimer's. Well, I'm not a betting guy, but those aren't great to me. So the last words he said was, so carpe diem. Look, it's not good. That's not a big deal. So I kept you know, it was on my mind. Eventually, I still saw incidents of me where I had failure to remember things. And I went back to him. He said, "What are you doing back here?" I said, "I told you, carpe diem." I said, "I have a lot of Latin," I said. And one of the priests said, "It's not seize the day, it's grab the day, it's pluck the day." And he just kind of like, you know, he must hear a lot of stuff like that. But I followed it. And then I was in the first trial, and I'll end with this, which they cut off, not because of Dr. Salloway, but because of the two companies decided they were going to pull it. And I had been going for at least a year and a half. And in those days, I had to go afterwards for, I can't remember the name, but you go through a tunnel. You know, they put you in that thing and they measure your brain and all this stuff.
The MRI scanner.
And I always remember it because the woman who was doing it was always eating her lunch, and I could see it. So, she was at Brown. She wasn't here. And the next thing I know, I'm out for a year and a half, and it was terrible. I got no treatment, no where to go. I could have gone crying to him, but it wasn't his fault. So, you know, when you talked about how important it is for people to speak up and people to, the man who's going to have the first go around,
Mark.
That's so important that people talk about it. I have guys, I live in Kingstown, but I live and I go to a little place until recently with my dog, who we just lost. And you know, it's a bunch of guys and a few women, and a woman who from Connecticut who's gotten attached to this. And they used to say, "You believe this guy's got Alzheimer's?" You know, I was doing well. I'm not sure I'm doing as well now because of that. So I just wanted to put my 2 cents in. I spent a lot of time up here. I don't regret one minute of it. The women who give you the shot and do all the other stuff are wonderful. Denise was this week, and then I have, you're right as old as I am. So, but these
So Neil, can I say a few? Well. Thank you for speaking up. I want to say a few things about Neil, because you deserve a lot of credit for this day. And Neil is because Jonathan and I were having a conversation about this yesterday, what does this mean and what's the real benefit here and so forth. But Neil, as he said, came to us many years ago with trouble finding words and a little bit of memory trouble and some depression and some history of alcohol issues. And it was unclear what was wrong, and then he took a break for a while and then came back with a little more of the same kind of problems. And I thought it could be Alzheimer's, but I wasn't sure. We did an ApoE test, and there was some genetic risk there. And we were able to get an amyloid PET scan, and that told us that you were building up plaques in the brain, and that confirmed the diagnosis of Alzheimer's. So I could say, you know, for sure, rather than just guessing. I don't have I'm a good clinician, as you know, Dr. Finale was very kind to say, but I don't have X-ray vision. I can't see what's in your brain. And the MRI doesn't show that, but this PET scan does show it. And then you were then eligible to go on aducanumab, and you were one of, was he the first one? You're one of the first people. I mean, starting in 2013. And, you know, you stayed on this drug for years, and on open treatment. And as you said, you were doing really well. You really hadn't declined over a number of years. You go out with your friends regularly, and as you said, they thought you were doing okay. And then the medicine was stopped early, which was very disappointing for everybody. And then after that, your family noticed things weren't, and you noticed things weren't quite right. And now you're back on the medicine. But it's just a great example of how this new technology, being able to make an accurate diagnosis, having a treatment, which I think in your case provided some extra stability. You're still independent, driving around. You're here today. This quality of life, your son has been terrific. Your family's been terrific. It's really preserving quality of life. It's really the later stages of Alzheimer's that are so devastating, that if we can keep people in milder stages and hopefully someday catch it even before any stages develop, any clinical stages develop, and delay or prevent it, that's really the goal. But you're really just living proof of what the potential benefit could be, and then you made today possible, and you and many others. Thank you so much, Neil. Other questions?
Hi, good morning, Dr. Salloway.
Good morning.
So lots of discussion about the amyloids and the amyloid plaque. You know, what would you say, for those of us who've seen this happen in our own families, during the early process of noticing changes, it really didn't seem like that got any provider's attention. So for people who aren't familiar with Butler, your team, you know, I feel like there's a lot of clinicians out there, maybe primary care doctors, who don't seem to point towards, look, maybe there is something developing like Alzheimer's, and let's see about getting this PET scan. I mean, we've never heard anything like that. So
Right.
what do you say to, you know, the community about how would you know when amyloid plaques are building, and you might advocate for family members to see if something's happening at that earlier stage, because then further along, you're not eligible for treatment. So
Right.
how to know what to do and when those amyloids are building up.
Right, so that's a great question. So, and you bring up a really important point. So to roll this out, to make this available to a large number of people who might benefit, we're really going to need to work closely with primary care or with neurologists who don't specialize in Alzheimer's but are, you know, would be interested, and helping to identify who would be a good candidate. So that's going to require more education and awareness and more discussion and interaction with primary care. We're hoping to form a really good partnership here in Rhode Island with primary care providers. We're really going to need their help to identify patients. So if people asking about memory difficulty, talking to family members to get their input, whether or not there's any kind of cognitive trouble, asking really practical questions about driving, about asking things that show up becoming repetitive. That's often an early sign. So trying to detect an early stage of memory loss, and then in this case, it would be referring to a center like ours. Rhode Island Hospital will also be offering this treatment so that we can decide whether amyloid testing makes sense if the person is likely to have Alzheimer's and might be a candidate. Right now, we're going to have spinal fluid testing, which gives us a pretty accurate readout about amyloid in the brain. PET scans are available. We can order them, but they're not currently covered, especially by Medicare or other carriers. There are active negotiations underway. Hopefully that's going to change soon. I don't have an announcement to make today about that, but we're hopeful that that will be covered and will become available, because I know spinal taps are fine, and it's really a small procedure, but people are nervous about them, and a lot of people would prefer to have a PET scan rather than have a spinal tap. So, but we're going to be starting out, at least initially, with spinal fluid testing for amyloid. So it's to answer your question in a nutshell, It's taking an interest in cognition and aging and trying to detect it early. And I think having a therapy is going to be a stimulus for primary care to get more engaged. I think we've been waiting for this time, and I think CMS or Medicare has been waiting to see if a therapy was available before approving PET scans. Yeah, John.
Dr. Salloway, you said that right now, in terms of the length of infusion, it's open-ended, and I obviously heard in the past that the infusions take about an hour.
Right.
So I was wondering, how open-ended is it? I mean, we've heard that timetable pass.
Mean how open-ended in terms of the duration of the treatment? Or?
Yeah, because that's what I inferred from what you said.
Yeah, well, the infusion itself, as you said, takes an hour. And it's very easy to do. Hardly ever are there any infusion reactions, and it goes very well, very smoothly. Right now, there's no end point in the label. I think we're going to have to develop, we need more data, really. I mean, there was, as you know, there was a recent trial with another anti-amyloid antibody called donanemab, and in that study, it showed a lowering of amyloid plaques and a slowing down of memory loss, similar to aducanumab, which was encouraging. But in that trial, they did two innovations, which hopefully we can incorporate into, at least into further study. One is they only treated people that had a certain level of tau protein. So there's two main proteins that build up in Alzheimer's. One is amyloid in plaques and tau protein in tangles. In the donanemab study, you had to have just the right amount of tau, not too much, not too little, plus amyloid. And so that was one innovation. And the second one was they stopped. Once the amyloid level got below the cutoff for consistent with Alzheimer's, they stopped treatment. And we did not do either of those in the aducanumab program, so we don't have data. We don't know if that's the best approach, but certainly that would be economical. I think ultimately, I don't have the answer for this, but what we're going to do is treat lower amyloid and start treating early, hopefully for prevention eventually. And then once we get to a certain level, we may be able to space out the treatments to a maintenance phase, which would be less frequent than once a month. Because amyloid still will reaccumulate, and probably we need to suppress it. And there may be other ways to suppress it too, but at least these antibodies we know do that. And, but right now, that's not in the current label. But
so the open-ended part is for how long over an extended period?
Yes. Right now, people will be coming monthly without a built-in termination point. We also don't have monitoring built in for change in amyloid. You know, we don't have coverage yet for Medicare that say we should get a PET scan well, we're going to get some type of amyloid testing at the beginning, but there's no built-in mechanism for monitoring change in amyloid at this time. Yes, Barbara.
I have another question. Did you say Neil is still in the aducanumab study?
So as you know, the studies were terminated early.
Right.
And then when positive data was seen, Biogen opened a new trial for people who were participants in the first two, in the phase 1, Neil's trial, and in the phase 3. And almost all of our people have come back into treatment, including Neil.
But you are not enrolling, because it's already been FDA approved, you're not enrolling new patients?
No, we're not enrolling, and the advantage actually, there is a benefit from being in research. I mean, Neil was he's committed over a long period of time. But one benefit of being in research, when we do get an approval like this, is Neil's already receiving the medicine and the MRI monitoring that's required without any charge. So he's guaranteed to get the medicine and doesn't have to deal with the insurance issues or the safety monitoring issues.
And that's forever?
I'm not sure the end point of that trial. At least for the next year or two, I'm not sure if there is a stated end point for that study. But as you know, the FDA is requiring Biogen to do an additional trial, and no information has been released yet about the design of that and when that's going to begin.
You'll be part of that?
I don't know. I haven't heard the details. It's going to be challenging to recruit people if it's placebo-controlled, if the medicine is available. So the people who are going to be most motivated will want to make sure they're getting the medicine, an already approved medicine. So we'll have to see what the details are. Well, thanks everyone for coming. We really appreciate it. We're making history today, and it's great to share it with all of you, and especially with Neil and Dave and Rosalind and so many others, and Mark, who made today possible. Thank you.